Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and some title update 3 talk. We're only into the first week of the update with more coming like Arch-Tempered New Udra and, the seasonal event. And at this point we could probably expect a mid-patch major update, like, the May and August updates. So this is going to be largely about the collab, the initial launch of the update, how it's landed, how I feel about it. How has Omega fared in this update in general? Pretty damn good. On Steam, so, PC specifically, it's peaked at just under 130,000 players all at once on September 29th and has held over 100,000 every moment since, so that's pretty fantastic. We peaked at 70,000 back in July with the last title update, which also fell off a lot faster. So Omega is currently holding players' attention, that's for sure. But how, why, and is it all positive? Well, right now we can see that it's clearly not. If we look at the PC reviews in comparison to the huge win of the player count, it's interesting. Overall, whether it's positive or negative reviews in general, they have fallen off a cliff since the review bombing back in July, only to rear their head for the first time with title update 3, but still not as bad as it was back then. Either way, it's still not a good look, with only 13% of the overall reviews on the 29th of September being positive. My take is this: it's a successful update due to the popularity, and that's obvious. A lot of people will be coming back to the game for the first time in a while and maybe experiencing the still bad optimization, seeing that it hasn't majorly changed in title update 3 when they really need it to. This isn't a surprise. They've talked about the fact that it's happening in title update 4, as we'll talk about. So for now, let's talk about that new content, Omega. Almost every side of Omega I'm absolutely thrilled by. The only downsides I have for it are, say, its design, which I find boring. It's just, the OG Omega design, that beetle thing, used in a lot of the games and the originals, but we've also seen it in a lot of different designs and forms that are a lot more interesting. So I would have preferred something more monstery or fresh, at least for Omega, but it's fine. Obviously the bigger downsides for this update are the lack of weapons. Like, we got 3 total: greatsword, insect glaive, SNS, that was it. There's actually 14 weapons, and we'd all would have liked one. And with there only being 1 monster for this update, I find that particularly upsetting. But that's not really the monster. Let's talk about the fight, where overall I think the mechanics are incredible, with this variety of interactions based on the aggro or enmity mechanic, like the missile launch that's a nightmare as he fires 6, 7, 8 missiles in a row where everyone's running around and you're forced into this downtime phase. But yeah, the fact that when someone has enmity, all of those slams occur but on one person, and so the other 3 people during that attack, they're completely free to do DPS. Completely changing the experience. I also think the location of the fight, which is Dahaad's special arena as you progress through that, works super well with the idea of a MMO raid boss and the progression of a fight through the 3 main phases. Those stages where it initially starts pretty forgiving, introducing the panto mode in the second area. In the third area you have the clone DPS check, and the final area where it's just ridiculous. Anyway, speaking of panto creator mode, it is crazy. The fact that it changes the hit zones is really interesting. Normally you'd want to be attacking the hind legs with slash damage because they have great hit zones 60, whereas your blunt weapons or ranged weapons, they'd be at the front legs or the head. When the hit zones change with the panto mode, everything becomes tankier, and the idea obviously is to break the legs and interrupt the mode. But that gets harder as those hit zones go down. This encourages special sets and setups, like using Mind's Eye that does wonders for the panto mode specifically, where maybe you bring a fire weapon obviously for the clone DPS check and swap to that. Maybe you're tanking, so you make sure you got guard up 3, or using a shield in general, to be honest. It allows you to actually start blocking the lasers and the channel beam with, say, the stalwart guard, which is super cool. A lot of people are using evade extender, which is amazing in this fight to help you actually move out of the telegraphed attacks. I like how it progresses where, yeah, you're breaking the legs right to interrupt the panto mode, but towards the end of the fight, you've done that so much that you start literally breaking off parts of the armor, generating those shield generators to put in ideal places, but still hitting that Monster Hunter feel of weakening a monster, where, it starts to limp. Well, this is a machine, so you're stripping it from its armor. They also gave it 3 different special weaknesses. You got the 2 on the head with the 2 different beams, or the one that happens after the tantrum attack when it's exhausted, and all 4 legs lit up for a free focus strike, which is cool because all 4 hunters could strike a different leg at the same time, in theory. The special interactions like the screamer pods drawing the Omega Micros into a location, or the fact that when you get a full knockdown in the final section, it has a special fall on its side thing where you can finally reach the power generator on the back for big DPS potential. essential. The fight really is a different experience when you understand it, when you engage with those mechanics and manage them, whether you bring a build and setup that actually deals with the problems, whether it's a team comp, or the way people are playing specifically. So let's talk about the whole FF14 raid monster hunter concept and how it's been updated with Omega. I actually didn't like the original behemoth for that aspect. Though the fight itself was great and very memorable, I just like being able to hunt. And it's part of why I'm not massively a fan of siege fights, because I don't like sitting on a cannon and firing at the right time, you know, that kind of stuff. I don't mind how challenging a fight is or how crazy they go, but I want to be me versus the monster ultimately. For that reason, back with Behemoth, the idea of the whole dedicated tank and healers and DPS did get in the way of that. While you could solo it, those mechanics were a bit invasive. I can still respect them trying to do something fresh and new, and again, it was memorable, it was successful. But here we are with Omega and the feedback of Behemoth by comparison, and they're doing these things again, but in a much better way. Yeah, you've got enmity and how it affects different attacks. You do have enemy health scaling, but you have solutions to that. If you want to solo it, you can. Its health will actually scale for full solo mode. If you want to play multiplayer, you can have a much better experience by bringing in the support hunters and filling any dead slots. They've taken that seriously, where say the lance user clearly mechanically tries to generate enmity and hold aggro for you. If you're playing with other players, you can set roles and have like a lancer or shield user try to be a tank, making a build with that in mind. The support style focus for free meal and faster item use and wide range. But everyone can play around that. There's no dedicated tank, but you know that the missile mechanic's coming, so someone generates enmity. Everyone can throw healing powder. You can engage with those mechanics, but in a less rigid way. It's extremely impactful when everyone knows the mechanics of the fight on an individual level. That's probably the best way to take the fight. Second best is just to bring support hunters who will let you get a lot of free DPS and provide great healing too. Really, the hardest version of this is the true solo, but the fact that it scales to a solo health, so way less, it's completely fine. So it feels to me that they've created that raid feeling of an FF collab, but in a way we can play around it. Josh also talked to me about this and referenced the whole Elatrion discourse, because there is some comparisons you can make there. Back with Elatrion, you needed to do elemental focused setups, where you're pumping element to break the horn and deal with the mechanics of the fight. Josh was saying that he remembers having to use dual blades for that fight for a period there, when he only really wanted to use greatsword. That concept of like, here's this cool element requirement, you must change your weapon and playstyle and stuff, but not every weapon was as good as others at doing that, and forced people to play weapons they might normally not. You could argue that being a good thing, but there are problems there. Omega does this too, like you should be bringing a thunder weapon, and you should be bringing a fire weapon for the clone. But hey, you actually get to swap mid-hunt, which is a big difference, and it's valid to use all kinds of weapons for different purposes. Like, you just have an artian weapon with a bit of element on it, and then the element attack 3 decoration. Smooth. But there's a good reason for one person to bring a paralysis weapon instead of a fire weapon. That'll trigger on the clone, helping your team. Maybe your tank isn't fully focused on thunder, but maybe has a setup for KO and that kind of thing. And sure, it demands you think about what you're doing when and why, but it does it in a much more open-ended way that works for a lot more players. That's a step forward. For the difficulty of the fight, obviously it's a big deal. A lot of people feel that this is too hard. Personally, I feel it's just right. The idea that it requires intentional setups for some actual hunting thoughts, like, you know, changing your set to be a bit more defensive rather than max DPS because you need it, having wide range to help your team because they need it, actually going out of your way to farm sets, upgrade your sets, go after the new RNG talismans to encourage the 9-star monsters. It's not the perfect fight. Plenty of people clearly find this too much, too many mechanics, too much to adapt to. They can't use their usual setup and just win. But you know, a lot of Wilds has been that. A great example would be my girlfriend, who would play in a casual manner. Not really upgrade her armor all that often, not really use like a meta build, but in this case, she really had to stop and think about it and make these changes, which I think is a really good thing. We've lost that aspect of Monster Hunter that requires you to adapt and really think about what you're doing. So I'm grateful for something that engages you, demands you to bring the best setup you can, and really try. But for me, the fight satisfied me in a way that Elatrion and Fatalis did, which I definitely couldn't say about pretty much any other hunt in Rise or Wild so far, at least not until now. So I think Omega's been a huge success, and the player count speaks for itself. Performance issues are still a huge point of contention, and a valid one though. And it's just something that happens when you have something that draws a lot of people back, but then there's been no major optimization in TU3. People just experience the same stuff that annoyed them last time. And it sucks because they told us major optimization wouldn't happen in this update, and it's coming in Title Update 4. So let's highlight a popular post on Reddit and talk about that. Nearly 10,000 upvotes, I'm falling out of love with Monster Hunter Wilds, as we only got one new monster every few months and a ton of new cosmetic crap to buy with real money. Meanwhile, the lack of fixing the port optimization, connection issues, and quote garbage matchmaking remain. Most of this I so heavily disagree with. Let's take the most valid one here, optimization issues. The reasoning for the lack of it in this update was clear. Major work like this isn't something you can do by snapping your fingers. It's also very risky. As we saw with the May update, the shader loading bug, a lot of people were angry about that. Personally, I stopped playing when it happened. If they mess up major optimization again, make something worse, I think it's a death blow. So while the optimization state is better than it was in the past, it's still unacceptable. We can all agree to that. But at the same time, you can't say you've got any respect for the reality of the situation, like what it takes to resolve, the risk they pose if they make it worse again. That's why they told us that and why it's coming in Title Update 4. The PC improvements for TU4 include CPU and GPU related optimization fixes, followed by a second stage of mitigation measures to ensure everything is working as intended. These fixes are designed to address the issues PC players are experiencing, including crashes, low frame rates, gameplay stability, and overall CPU, GPU, and RAM usage. So those are all like the big ticket problems that we have with the game, and they're heavily working on it for Title Update 4. If they don't achieve it in Title Update 4, it's gonna backfire bad. But they told us that's what they're doing, and obviously it takes time. So it's tough, because the big problem here, really, is that the game launched before any of this was resolved. And that's the situation we're in with PC gaming. Things just get released in these janky states more commonly now, and get fixed later, because it works, the game still sells, that kind of thing. Monster Hunter isn't the first to do this, it won't be the last, and World had its own launch issues too, people often forget. That's the most valid aspect of that post. The rest is like diabolical. One new monster every few months is just BS. Title Update 1 came super fast and gave us 2 new monsters. Title Update 2 came after that with 2 new monsters. There was a mid-Title Update 1 major patch, which has not happened before. There was a mid-Title Update 2 patch that massively rebalanced the weapons and introduced 9-star monsters, which was a pile of new things to do and monsters to engage with. That's not happened before. So that's just wrong. But then you got like the cosmetic side of things. What do you think would happen if they weren't adding cosmetics you might choose to buy and some of the free stuff they do too? Would we get 16 more armors per monster, infinite free stuff, an additional monster in this update? Currently, we have 2 armor sets from one monster, and one of those had 2 versions you can freely swap between for the first time ever with the whole non-gender locked armor. That's more than we could normally expect from one monster. Meanwhile, you got the people who create cosmetics that don't have anything to do with optimization or those aspects of the game. They're not developing monsters. The section of the team that works on cosmetics are like employed to do that. Cosmetics make money, and with that money they have money to pay the people to make more cosmetics and make more profit. That's a business. And I do not think it affects the content outside of that or the amount of content at all. The part that you should be complaining about is the whole lore conversations they put behind some of the new camp gear options, the paid ones. That's heinous. If they're going to add that feature, the lore part should be added for free. That's obvious. And it's like the first time I can think of where Wilds has had a microtransaction that's been in the way of actual content. So we can agree that's a bad concept, and hopefully the backlash from this makes them reconsider. Another part, again, that you can be fairly upset about with this update is the 3 weapons. Greatsword, SNS, insect glaive. There's 11 other weapons missing here, and that sucks. And when it was only like quote unquote one monster, I did expect a weapon for everyone. The last aspect that I want to cover is the whole idea that collabs are bad in general. There's a group of people that would prefer an actual monster, maybe a new one for Wild, or a fan favorite returning one, whatever. I think that's fair line of thought. But there's this funny line that goes a bit too far for me, where they'd be like, I'd prefer another Teostra title update than a collab. And I find that crazy because Omega is actually fresh and engaging and really good for the series. Whereas I could not hunt a Teostra anytime soon and care at all. There's this interesting take as well that Omega's value and relevance will fade because it's a fad as a collab. A monster rather than a collab creature wouldn't fade, but this is going to be fleeting. And I just don't think that's how it works for a collab monster or any monster in general. I think it's only relevant based on if the fight is satisfying and enjoyable to the point that people go back to fight it again, even though they don't need to. So time will tell on that. But I just don't think it has anything to do with whether it's a collab or not. But yeah, that does it for this talk. I wanted to discuss the different aspects of the fight, the parts I really like, topics I thought were worth bringing up. Obviously, there's a couple things I am disappointed by, like the lack of 14 weapons, the weird lore microtransaction thing. But for the fight and monster itself, the thing that actually matters, I think it's been fantastic. Still hitting that MMO feel, yet providing, a solo experience or a support hunter version that works really well, covering their bases. I easily rate it up there with Elytron and Fatalis as some of my favourite fights in the series, especially solo. Which is not how I imagined it would go for Omega after the Behemoth version, which I didn't like nearly as much. So let us know what you think about all of it. Good luck with your hunts. Until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.